They laughed when she stepped onto the firing line. The snobby shooters mocked her worn jeans and simple demeanor. But as Rebecca Porter shouldered her rifle, silence fell across the range. No one expected what happened next, a single shot that would change everything. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss another unbreakable tale that will leave you breathless. The morning sun peeked through the curtains of Rebecca Porter's modest farmhouse kitchen, casting warm rays across the wooden table where she sat nursing her coffee. Family photos lined the walls, generations of Porters standing proudly in hunting gear, rifles respectfully held, game displayed with honor. Her grandfather, father, and 3 brothers featured prominently, but Rebecca appeared in just as many. At 35, Rebecca's hands bore the calluses of someone who worked the land. Her face, though striking, carried a natural beauty unmarked by expensive products. She wore her chestnut hair in a practical ponytail, a few strands always managing to escape and frame her face. "You sure about this, Becky?" Her father's voice crackled through the phone pressed between her ear and shoulder. "Dad, I've been shooting since I was 8, she replied, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who knew her worth, even if she didn't broadcast it. "I know, sweetheart. You're better than all of us put together. But these competition folks, they can be mighty unwelcoming to newcomers, especially women?" She finished his sentence, a hint of resignation in her voice. The silence on the other end confirmed it. Rebecca sighed, running her finger along the rim of her coffee mug. "The regional championship is next month? Dad, I need to practice on a proper range with measured distances. Our back 40 just won't cut it anymore." Her father chuckled. "You've always been the determined one." After hanging up, Rebecca walked to the old oak cabinet in the corner of the living room. The lock clicked open, revealing her grandfather's rifle, a classic bolt action that had been meticulously maintained and upgraded over the years. Nothing flashy, but in the right hands, devastatingly accurate. Rebecca ran her fingers along the smooth wooden stock, worn from decades of use. This wasn't just a firearm, it was her heritage. Her grandfather had taught her father, and her father had taught her, passing down not just technique, but respect. "A good shot isn't about strength," her grandfather used to say. "It's about patience, breathing, and knowing exactly who you are when you squeeze that trigger." She carefully placed the rifle in its case alongside the spotting scope and ammunition she had loaded herself. Each round crafted with precision, tested and perfected over countless early mornings and long evenings after work at the veterinary clinic. Rebecca checked her watch, an old reliable timepiece that had been her mother's. She needed to get going if she wanted to secure a spot at the range. Slipping into her olive green jacket over a simple white t-shirt, she took one last look at herself in the hallway mirror. No makeup, no pretense. Just Rebecca Porter, 5th-generation hunter, veterinarian, and unassuming markswoman. She didn't look like the competitive shooters she'd seen in magazines with their logo-covered gear and expensive custom rifles. But she didn't need to. Her phone buzzed with a text from her brother. "Show them what a Porter can do, but don't show off too much or Dad will never stop bragging." Rebecca smiled, typing back, "No promises." As she loaded her gear into her well-used pickup truck, she felt a flutter of nervousness. Not about shooting, never about that, but about entering a world where she knew she'd be judged before she ever took a shot. "Just focus on the target," she reminded herself, starting the engine. "Nothing else matters when it's just you, the rifle, and the bullseye." The shooting range sprawled across several acres of cleared land, nestled against gently rolling hills that served as natural backstops. Rebecca navigated her pickup past rows of expensive SUVs and gleaming trucks with custom paint jobs. Her own vehicle, practical and mud-spattered, stood out like a dandelion in a rose garden. The main clubhouse was an impressive structure of stone and timber, with large windows overlooking the various ranges. Inside, the walls displayed trophies, mounted game heads, and photographs of past champions, almost all men. Rebecca approached the registration desk with measured steps. "Membership card?" asked the attendant, barely looking up from his computer. "I'm not a member," Rebecca replied, "just looking to use the long-range targets for the day." The attendant's eyes flicked up, taking in her worn jeans and simple attire. The day pass is $75. You'll need to sign a waiver. His tone suggested he wasn't sure she could afford it. Rebecca handed over her credit card without comment. She'd been saving up for this. You know the long-range area is for experienced shooters, right? He added, sliding the waiver form toward her. The beginner range is over there. He pointed toward a much smaller, less equipped area. I'm familiar with firearms. Thank you, Rebecca said, her voice polite but firm as she signed the form. With her pass clipped to her jacket, Rebecca made her way across the manicured grounds toward the long-range section. She could feel eyes tracking her as she walked, carrying her grandfather's rifle case and a small backpack of supplies. The long-range area was less crowded than the other sections, but that didn't make it any less intimidating. 6 shooting stations stretched before her, 3 already occupied by men with equipment that probably cost more than her truck. Rebecca selected the station farthest from the others and began methodically setting up. She unfolded her shooting mat, assembled her spotting scope on its tripod, and carefully removed her rifle from its worn leather case. Unlike the glossy, tactical-looking firearms around her, Rebecca's rifle retained much of its classic appearance, though the barrel, trigger, and scope had been upgraded over the years. She pulled out her notebook, filled with meticulous notes on distance, wind, and ammunition performance. Look what wandered in, a voice stage whispered from 2 stations down. Rebecca didn't turn. She'd expected this. Instead, she continued her preparation, checking the wind flags fluttering at various distances downrange. Someone should tell her this isn't the place for Grandpa's hunting rifle, another voice added, followed by chuckles. The men's voices carried easily across the otherwise quiet range. Rebecca recognized the type, shooters who spent more money on gear than on practice, whose knowledge came more from forums than experience. Think she's lost? The voice belonged to a tall man moving between stations. He wore a shooting jacket covered in sponsor patches, wraparound sunglasses perched on his head. His custom rifle probably cost more than Rebecca made in 3 months. Rebecca kept her expression neutral as she loaded her ammunition into a simple leather holder. Let them talk. Let them assume. On the range, the only thing that mattered was the result. She slipped on her hearing protection, settled into position, and began her focusing routine. Breathing slowly, she visualized the shot, following her pre-shot checklist that had become second nature over decades of practice. A shadow fell across her mat. "Hey there," said the man with the sponsor patches, looking down at her with an expression of amusement. "I'm Travis. You sure you're in the right place, honey?" Rebecca lowered her hearing protection to rest around her neck. "I'm sure," she said simply, meeting Travis's gaze without hostility, but without backing down. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's just that this is the long-range section. Precision shooting, not exactly beginner-friendly." "I'm aware," Rebecca replied, turning back to her setup. Travis lingered, studying her rifle. "That's vintage," he said, the word heavy with condescension. "What is that, your dad's old hunting rifle?" "Grandfather's," Rebecca corrected, continuing her preparations. "Been in the family for generations." A small crowd had gathered now. 3 other men drifted over, their curiosity piqued by Travis's interaction with the newcomer. They wore similar attire, expensive tactical gear, logo-covered shirts, and expressions of barely concealed amusement. "Guys, come meet." Travis paused, realizing he hadn't asked her name. "Rebecca," she supplied, not offering her hand. "Rebecca here is joining us with her grandfather's hunting rifle," Travis announced, prompting chuckles from his companions. One of them, a younger man with a meticulously trimmed beard, shook his head. "You know there's a sporting goods store in town that rents proper precision rifles. Might be worth checking out before you waste your time here." Rebecca checked her scope alignment as if she hadn't heard them. She'd encountered this attitude her entire life, at hunting camps, at shooting events, even at veterinary school. Men who assumed that because she was a woman, she couldn't possibly understand the technical aspects of firearms or marksmanship. "What distance are you planning to shoot?" asked another man, this one older with silver at his temples. "Starting at 600 yards, then moving to 800 if things go well," Rebecca answered calmly. The men exchanged glances, eyebrows raised. 600 yards with that setup? Travis whistled. "That's ambitious. The hike starts to get pretty steep after 400, said the silver-haired man, not unkindly. Just so you know. Rebecca nodded but didn't respond further. She wasn't here to argue or convince them. She was here to practice. As the men reluctantly returned to their stations, she could hear their murmured comments. $10 says she doesn't hit paper at 400. I'll take that bet and raise you 20, says she gives up after 3 shots. Probably just here to take Instagram pictures anyway. Rebecca took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. The comments stung, but she'd learned long ago that the best response wasn't words. It was performance. She focused on her routine, checking her rifle zero at 100 yards first, making minute adjustments and recording the results in her worn notebook. From his station, Travis continued watching her between his own shots. His companions did the same, their curiosity evident despite their dismissive attitude. Rebecca spent 30 minutes at the 100-yard target, shooting 5-round groups with methodical precision. Her groupings were tight, something the men would have noticed if they had been paying attention to her target rather than her appearance. When she finished her warm-up, she adjusted her scope for 300 yards, then proceeded to shoot another tight group. Not a single comment came from the men, though she could feel their occasional glances. As she prepared to move to 600 yards, Travis approached again, this time with an air of forced casualness. Not bad for 300, he said as if granting a major concession. But 600's a different game altogether. Wind becomes a serious factor. Bullet drop is significant. Not something you can just jump into. Rebecca looked up at him, her patience wearing thin, but her voice remaining level. Thank you for your concern. His smile tightened. Just trying to save you some frustration, that's all. The afternoon sun beat down on the range as Rebecca prepared for her 600-yard shots. She had meticulously updated her ballistic calculations, accounting for temperature, humidity, and the slight crosswind that had picked up. Travis and his friends had given up all pretense of focusing on their own shooting. They stood in a loose semicircle behind their firing line, watching her with undisguised skepticism. This should be good, Travis said, loud enough for her to hear. Rebecca positioned herself, adjusting her posture and grip. Her breathing slowed as she went through her mental checklist. Hey guys, Travis called out. Maybe we should give her some pointers before she embarrasses herself. The group erupted in laughter. One man pulled out his phone, clearly intending to record what he expected to be a humiliating failure. I bet she doesn't even know how to adjust for windage, said the bearded man, not bothering to lower his voice. Rebecca remained focused, though a muscle in her jaw twitched slightly. This wasn't just about her anymore. She thought of her family, of all the women who'd faced similar dismissal in male-dominated spaces. Travis approached her firing position again, standing close enough to cast a shadow across her scope. Look, no offense, but that antique you're shooting isn't designed for this kind of precision work, he said, gesturing at her rifle. The barrel harmonics alone would make consistent grouping impossible, not to mention the outdated trigger assembly. Rebecca finally looked up at him. Would you mind stepping back? You're blocking my light. Travis's smile faltered slightly, but he didn't move. I'm just saying, maybe you should start with something more realistic. 600 yards is where the real shooters separate from the hobbyists. Didn't you hear her, Travis? Called one of his friends. She needs her light for her Instagram photos. More laughter rippled through the group. Tell you what, Travis said, lowering his voice to what he probably thought was a generous tone. Hit anywhere on the target at 600, just anywhere, and I'll personally sponsor your membership here. His friends snickered behind him. And if I don't? Rebecca asked, her voice steady. Travis's smile widened. Then you admit you're out of your league, pack up your grandfather's hunting rifle, and let the big boys get back to their practice. The challenge hung in the air between them. Rebecca knew it was petty, knew she had nothing to prove to these men, but something in her, the same Porter stubbornness that had carried her family through generations, refused to back down. One shot, she said finally. Travis blinked, clearly expecting her to decline. What? One shot at 600 yards, that's all I need. Travis's laughter echoed across the range, joined quickly by his companions. One shot, honey. Even the best shooters don't make those kinds of claims. Rebecca remained silent, waiting for his answer. All right, Travis finally said, spreading his hands in a magnanimous gesture. One shot it is, but not just anywhere on the target. He turned to his friends. What do you think, guys? Center ring, or is that too cruel? The silver-haired man pointed downrange. There's an 8-inch gong at 600. Hit that. Travis's eyes lit up. Perfect. Hit the gong. One shot. He was practically giddy with anticipation of her failure. The bearded man stepped forward. And just to make it interesting, if you miss, you not only leave, you buy us all a round at the clubhouse. Rebecca hesitated for the first time. She hadn't planned on this becoming a spectacle, a wager. She'd come here to practice, to prepare for the championship, not to perform for an audience of scornful men. For a moment, she considered simply packing up and leaving. There would be other ranges, other days to practice. Her father's warning echoed in her mind. But then she thought of her grandfather, of the lessons he taught her about standing your ground, of her mother, who'd faced similar prejudice as one of the few female hunters in their rural community decades ago. She thought of all the times she'd stayed quiet, walked away, let comments slide, because confrontation wasn't worth it. Maybe this time it was. Rebecca looked up at Travis and his expectant audience. And if I hit it? Travis's smile was patronizing. Name your price. She didn't want their money or their hollow apologies. What she wanted was something more meaningful. If I hit it, Rebecca said carefully, you all spend an hour learning proper shooting form, from me. There was a moment of stunned silence before the men burst into laughter again. Deal! Travis exclaimed, wiping tears of mirth from his eyes. Oh man, this is too good. As the men stepped back to give her space, still chuckling among themselves, Rebecca closed her eyes briefly. The pressure was real now. It wasn't just about proving herself. It was about challenging their entire worldview. She settled back into position, blocking out everything except her breath, her rifle, and the distant gong. The familiar weight of the stock against her shoulder brought a sense of calm. This rifle had harvested game to feed her family for generations. It had taught her discipline, patience, and respect. One shot. She could do this. She had done it thousands of times before. Rebecca began her ritual, shutting out the world as she prepared to squeeze the trigger. The range fell silent as Rebecca settled into her final position. Even Travis and his friends had stopped their snickering, watching with anticipation for what they assumed would be an embarrassing failure. Rebecca focused on her breathing, slow, measured, controlled. She felt the familiar connection with her rifle, an extension of herself rather than a separate tool. Through her scope, the 8-inch gong hung at 600 yards, a small circle of steel against the backdrop of the hill. She ran through her mental calculations once more. The wind had shifted slightly, 2 miles per hour from the right. Temperature 72 degrees. Humidity moderate. She adjusted her scope minutely to compensate for these factors, plus the bullet drop over that distance. Travis cleared his throat impatiently. Any time this century would be fine. Rebecca didn't respond. She continued her process unrushed. Her finger rested lightly against the trigger as she exhaled halfway, holding the remainder of her breath. The crosshairs settled precisely on a spot just off-center of the gong, accounting for wind drift. Time seemed to slow in this moment. There was no Travis, no audience of doubters, no pressure, just her, the rifle, and the target, just as her grandfather had taught her. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report cracked across the range, the recoil flowing through her body like a familiar wave. Before the echo had died away, a clear, resonant ping rang out from downrange. A direct hit. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The clean, unmistakable sound of lead striking steel had silenced everyone. Rebecca calmly ejected the spent casing, set the rifle safety, and sat up. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply reached for her notebook and recorded the shot details: windage, elevation adjustment, temperature. Travis stood open-mouthed, his sunglasses slipping down his nose. His friends had similar expressions of disbelief. The silver-haired man was the first to recover, raising his spotting scope to confirm what they had all heard. Center hit, he announced, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. Dead center. Rebecca began reloading, preparing for her next shot as if nothing extraordinary had happened. as if she hadn't just done what many recreational shooters spend years trying to achieve consistently. That, Travis started, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. That could have been luck. Could have been, Rebecca agreed mildly. Before Travis could respond, she settled back into position, went through her entire process again with the same methodical precision, and fired a second shot. Another clear ping echoed across the range. Jesus Christ, muttered the bearded man. Rebecca fired a third shot and a fourth and a fifth, each one finding its mark with unerring accuracy. 5 shots, 5 hits, in less than 3 minutes. When she finally sat up again, the atmosphere had completely transformed. The mockery had given way to stunned respect. The silver-haired man was shaking his head in disbelief. The bearded young man had put away his phone, no longer interested in recording what he'd expected to be a humiliation. And Travis, confident, condescending Travis, stood with his arms crossed, his expression a complex mixture of embarrassment and reluctant admiration. "Who are you?" he finally asked. Rebecca began carefully packing up her equipment. "Just someone who learned to shoot before they learned to brag about it," she replied, her voice calm, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. She stood, shouldering her rifle case. "Now, about that lesson I promised to give you all." The men exchanged glances. Rebecca could see the internal struggle playing across their faces, the wounded pride battling with genuine curiosity about how this unassuming woman had just outshot them all. "Unless," she added, "you're not men of your word." Travis's jaw worked back and forth as he processed what had just happened. The other men looked to him, waiting for his response. Finally, the silver-haired man stepped forward. "I'm in," he said, extending his hand to Rebecca. "Robert Coleman, that was some of the finest shooting I've seen in 20 years at this range." Rebecca shook his hand, nodding in acknowledgement. One by one, the others introduced themselves, all except Travis, who remained rooted in place, pride visibly wrestling with curiosity. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" asked the bearded man, Mike, as he'd introduced himself. "My family," Rebecca replied simply. 5 generations of hunters and marksmen. My grandfather started teaching me when I was 8. My father continued my training through my teens." "But that level of precision," Robert shook his head. "That's competition-grade shooting." Rebecca allowed herself a small smile. "The regional championship next month is why I'm here practicing. My first formal competition." Understanding dawned on their faces. "You're not just some random woman who wandered in," Mike said slowly. "No," Rebecca agreed. "I'm a random woman who's been shooting precision rifles for 27 years. Travis finally found his voice. "Why didn't you just say so?" Rebecca looked at him evenly. "Would it have mattered? Or would you have found another reason to doubt me?" He had the grace to look somewhat abashed. "Well," Robert said, breaking the awkward silence, I believe we owe you an hour of our time, and speaking for myself, I'd be a fool not to take shooting advice from someone with your skill." For the next hour, Rebecca guided the men through her approach to long-range shooting. She showed them her breathing technique, her method for calculating adjustments, the way she maintained consistent cheek weld and trigger pressure. Even Travis eventually joined in, his initial reluctance giving way to genuine interest. "You make it look so simple," Mike commented as he struggled to maintain the steady position Rebecca had demonstrated. "Not simple," she corrected. "Fundamental. Master the basics before worrying about expensive gear and tactical accessories." As the lesson concluded, Robert approached her again. "The club has a precision rifle team," he said. "We compete regionally. Based on what I saw today, you'd be an asset." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "The same club that didn't think I belonged on this range 2 hours ago?" Robert had the decency to look embarrassed. "Perspectives can change. Mine certainly has." Travis joined them, still carrying a hint of his earlier arrogance, but tempered now with respect. "That regional championship next month, some of us will be there too." He paused, then added, "It'll be interesting competition." Rebecca smiled fully for the first time that day. "Yes," she agreed, "it certainly will be." As Rebecca drove home, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. She felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with proving others wrong, and everything to do with standing firm in her own truth. She thought of her grandfather's words again. Knowing exactly who you are when you squeeze that trigger. Today, she had remembered exactly who she was, not just a shooter, but a porter, someone who let results speak louder than words. Sometimes the most powerful statement is simply refusing to be defined by others' expectations. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and join our community of viewers who appreciate stories of quiet strength and unexpected talent. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from our global audience. Everyday people are underestimated based on appearance, gender, or background. Have you ever been in a situation where you surprised others with your hidden talents? Share your experiences in the comments. And remember, the most powerful skill isn't just expertise, but the quiet confidence to stand your ground when others doubt you. Until next time.